Hey there, I'm Zach with Colony Roofers. Today we're going to look at 3-tab shingles versus architectural shingles. I've got a couple samples here to show you, so let's go ahead and dive in and talk about the different categories you should look at when you're trying to make this decision for yourself. All right, so the first thing you're probably wondering is what's the difference in the appearance or the aesthetics of 3-tab shingles versus architectural shingles. So let's go ahead and look. This is a sample of a 3-tab shingle, and you can see it is literally just 3 tabs that are side by side. It's one layer, so not multi-dimensional, and you'll see why I'm pointing that out specifically in just a second. But this is pretty standard. Okay, so this is what we call sort of the budget shingle in roofing world. And then from an aesthetic standpoint, the other one that we've got here is architectural. Okay, and architectural, you're going to see right off the bat, has a lot more dimension to it. It has these things that we call the dragon teeth or the dragon tooth, and it is actually multi-layer. So you can see right here where there's a seam down the middle. This is basically 2 layers of shingles that are on top of each other and actually laminated together. This is a GAF shingle that we're using here for demonstration purposes. So from an aesthetic standpoint, that's the biggest difference is purely just how they look, what the profile of them is. If you ever see these actually laid out on a roof, what you would notice is the 3-tab shingles almost looks like sort of a brick pattern, whereas the architectural has a little bit more 3-dimensional view to it. So if you saw, a 3-tab shingle laid on top of a 3-tab shingle, it would look pretty much like we had a brick. It's going to look like that, and then when the other one comes on top, it's going to lay staggered. So we'll have one here, and then one here, and then one here, and then it'll come back on top again. So it ends up looking basically like a brick pattern you can see here as it goes up the roof. Architectural, you're never really from the street or from ground level going to be able to see that there's one shingle here and one shingle there, whereas 3-tab you can obviously see those bricks very clearly. So from an aesthetic standpoint, that's the biggest difference, is just which one of those looks do you like. There's going to be a lot more differences when we get into the function and cost categories as well. In terms of aesthetics though, you just need to make a decision. Do I like the brick pattern, or do I like more of the 3-dimensional look? All right, so the next area we'll talk about with regards to 3-tab versus architectural shingles is really the functionality of those shingles. So I showed you with the 3-tab shingle when we were looking at aesthetics that it's just one layer. The architectural shingle is a couple layers that are actually laminated together. And if you actually broke this down and we pulled this shingle apart, you would see that this actually basically looks like the bottom layer of this shingle looks like a 3-tab shingle. So when you're buying an architectural shingle, you're effectively getting a double layer, and that would be a layer actually on top of the 3-tab shingle, and that's what they call the dragon tooth. So a lot of the benefits that you're going to get from an architectural shingle are actually because of that double layer and the laminated properties that it has. So let's talk about longevity. When it comes to longevity, what's going to last longer, an architectural or a 3-tab, and how long are they going to last? Architectural is generally going to last anywhere from 30 to 50 years in our market. If you're in an area where there's, let's say down by the Atlanta airport, Hartsfield Jackson, there could be some jet fuel that's fallen on it and could cause some granulation over time prematurely. And so you may see it towards the shorter end of that age range. If you're in a place that doesn't have much tree cover, there's not a lot of moisture buildup on the roof, it's allowed to air out, it gets some sunlight, you could see very well closer to the 40 to 50 year time frame. So a few different things are going to go into determining how long, from a longevity standpoint, these shingles are going to last. But the important thing to know is that architectural is going to be significantly longer. 3-tab is going to be more in the 20 to 30 year time frame. You're definitely not going to get more than 30 years out of a 3-tab shingle. Most of that, again, is due to the fact that the architectural shingle has that dragon tooth and a second layer on it that's actually giving it that longevity. The next thing is, let's talk about storm damage or wind damage. So wind damage is what happens when you get a shingle, and they actually call this creasing of a 3-tab shingle. So let's say that this shingle is nailed to the roof. and a windstorm comes by and lifts this shingle up, and let's say this was nailed down, well, what would happen was it would actually pull this shingle up, and depending on the age, the brittleness, how much the sun had beat down on this roof, or just how strong the wind is on that specific day, it could actually break this shingle up. And there's actually fiberglass inside of these shingles, and so what will happen is it'll crack that fiberglass and create a mark right here that's actually a line, and they call that wind creasing on a shingle. So in terms of architectural versus 3-tab, you're going to get significantly better wind resistance from an architectural shingle because it has that double layer with the dragon tooth. When it comes to 3-tab shingles, it depends on the specific shingle and the specific brand, but you can get anywhere from 60 to 100 miles an hour of wind protection. With an architectural shingle, you can even get up to, I believe, 180 is what I've seen with some brands, but typically 135, 150 is going to be where they're at standard. So from a functionality standpoint, we're clearly giving architectural the nod. Now what you will see is when we get to cost in just a second, that's where you kind of pay for some of those benefits a little bit more. All right, so the last thing we want to talk about when it comes to 3-tab versus architectural shingles is cost. It's one of the most common questions we get. Well, how much is that going to cost to upgrade? So let's look at a just standard example of how much the difference in cost might be. I'm actually going to use our material cost as a contractor, which a lot of contractors watching this video may not like that, but at the end of the day, we believe in transparency with the customer, and so we're going to, kind of detail what the actual cost difference on our end would be. So let's say we have a 30 square roof. 1 square, if you're not familiar with that terminology, is 100 square feet. Well, for every square we have in roofing, we need 3 bundles of shingles. And so that's going to be 90 bundles of shingles for this specific house. That's usually going to be anywhere from $5 to $7 per bundle, okay? So we've got 90 bundles, and then I'm just going to use the high end of that range for conservatism's sake, and that would be $7 per bundle extra. So for architectural shingles, this is going to be $630 more for this specific roof as far as material cost goes, okay? So this is not the price you're going to get from me or from another contractor. Obviously, they may have additional costs that go into installing an architectural roof, or depending on your specific roof, it may be the exact same thing as a 3-tab from a labor standpoint, a nail standpoint, and that type of thing. But that's kind of what you can expect. So $630, if your house is double this size, let's say you have a 5,500 square foot house, maybe you double that, and you're looking at approximately $1,200 more in materials. Once that gets some margin added in there for the contractor that's installing it, maybe that would end up being $1,800 or so, something in that range. But what you can see, the bottom line is when it comes to 3-tab versus architectural shingles, the cost is really not that substantial in relation to the overall cost of the roof. And at the same time, you're going to get a lot of functional benefits to doing architectural. So if you have the ability to pay the slight extra and you're okay with the aesthetics of the architectural shingle, we always recommend at least doing an architectural shingle. There's even designer shingles that we haven't really talked about here that would kind of fall in a designer architectural category. Those can be substantially more than this, but at a minimum, you really want to try and put an architectural shingle on. And I'll give you one tip to use with your home insurance company. A lot of times, if you install a new roof with an architectural shingle, they'll actually go ahead and discount your policy because they know from a functional standpoint it's going to hold up better. But in terms of 3-tab versus architectural, overall, we're going to give architectural the win. Clearly, it's a better shingle from a functional standpoint. The cost is not that significantly more, and we typically will recommend that you go ahead and install that on your new roof.